Well, welcome to another episode of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions, 1300 547 777. They're the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria. Whether a large or small business in Melbourne, Sydney, Gippsland, Shepparton and Albury, they offer business phone systems, NBN services, CCTV and security systems, and they're based in Carrum Downs in southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, where it's hot. And as the great Robin Williams would say in the movie Vietnam, damn hot, but it's hot right throughout Australia. And even where our next guest is, he's in Adelaide. This man has covered the Indian and Australian cricket teams for many, many years for Crick Buzz and also for SEN Radio. Since moving to Australia with his wife Isha, who was studying a few years ago and basing himself in Adelaide, his career has skyrocketed along with his popularity. And he now enjoys a high profile, especially covering cricket and dabbling in AFL footy and also doing a podcast, mashing his two favourite sports together. And we'll ask him about that as to why cricket and wrestling. I mean, cricket, we all know, wrestling, another one of his favourite sports. He's also an author of excellent repute. He's written a magnificent book on MS Dohni in particular. It's a great pleasure to welcome Bharat Sundaresan. Bharat, great to have you with us.
No, thank you so much for having me on, Dan. And thank you so much for the kind introduction as well. Yeah, I don't even know where to start with the cricket wrestling stuff, but we'll get to that. But yeah, firstly, you are right. It is very, very hot. So I must apologize for being slightly late because I was just making sure the chickens that we have are as chilled as they can be. So just adding some ice cubes to their water, making sure they don't get boiled in this heat. So yeah, it's not quite farm life, but it is rural enough for us.
So you're outside Adelaide, where you're based?
Yeah, so we live in the Adelaide Hills, Dan.
Right.
So in a town called Uredla. So it's not a huge property, but big enough to have a coop which can hold seven chickens and enough space for our dogs to run around as well. So yeah, so we are far enough from Adelaide, but as you know, you're never far enough in Adelaide. So we're still pretty close to the city.
And you like it?
Oh, absolutely love it. I mean, so when we started our lives here, as you mentioned in the intro, my wife moved before I did, 2 years before I did. She did a master's in special ed, which has been her profession for a long time now. So she did it at Flinders University. And then when I joined her, we lived in a beautiful leafy suburb called Norwood for the first 3 or 4 years. But every time we would get into the car, we would always just drive up to the Adelaide Hills. It's blissful. It's otherworldly almost over here. So we always wanted to move here, and we've been very fortunate to call the Adelaide Hills our home for almost 3 years now.
Of course, Norwood is the home of the Kensington Cricket Club, one of the most famous cricket clubs in district cricket in South Australia. Often attracts players that come from interstate. John Inverarity, the great, incomparable as a cricketer anyway, Don Bradman, good players like Ashley Woodcock, Dennis Yagmich, and Greg Blewett played at Kensington. Yeah. So it's a very, very powerful cricket team, the Browns. You've been involved in cricket for many, many years. Has it always been something that you've been interested in? We know what India's like. It's a religion over there. Has it been a religion for you, Bharat?
Oh, it's been life for me, Dan. So from the time, my first memories of life are cricket related. So watching a cricket match, which was ironically from Australia. I was born in 1985. I don't remember much about my first 5 years. Neither do my folks or my brother, but either I got up to a lot or I got up to nothing, but there aren't too many stories about me growing up, except that I just always watched cricket. That's all I obsessed over, even before the time I can remember. But my first memory of life is watching the West Indies and India play an ODI on Australian soil on a very tiny television set just around the time India in the early 90s was opening up to the world. So this would have been the tri-series between India, Australia, West Indies just before the 92 World Cup. And that's really my first memory in life. And yeah, cricket was not just integral to my life. Like you said, I mean, a lot of Indian people obsess over cricket, but for me, it really was my identity from a very young age. It's kind of, I don't know how or why, but I just seem to know a lot more about cricket than anyone else, not just in my age group, but most age groups. So whether it was at school or within my family or where I lived for the neighbors or wherever we went, they all came to me for cricket knowledge, and I was just able to spill it out. This was long before the internet came along, so I have no idea where I got my information from. Maybe it was just listening to TV commentary more intently than other kids my age were. But so it was always almost predestined that whatever I did in life, it would involve cricket. And how true it was, or whoever said that, or pretty much everybody did, they were all right. So they all can pat themselves on the back.
Do you remember much about things before 1990? As you said, you got right into the game in 1990. Have you read a lot about it? I mean, my first interest, I'm a fair bit older than you, was the 75, 76 West Indies tour of Australia. I remember a little bit of the World Cup, the first ever World Cup in 75, but that was when I really remembered
Yeah.
cricket. But I can remember, not remember, but I know about a lot of stuff beforehand from reading books and things like that. So did you read a lot about the history of the game before you were alive as well? Not obviously before you were alive, but
Yep.
about what happened before you were alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. And not just read about it. I was just, so my brother, who I'm not very close with now, but when we were growing up, the only thing we had in common was cricket. So he was one of those, like he was 6 years older than me. So, like me, or maybe I imbibed it from him, he watched cricket very differently to most people in India, where in India, there are a lot of people, as you know, but people like to get together in big groups and watch cricket and just chat amongst themselves. But my brother and I were kind of different. Like, so we would always watch it by ourselves. And like I said, we not only did we know a lot about what was happening and who the cricketers were, like, my go-to stat has always been, I always knew how many half centuries Jeff Marsh had going into the 1992 World Cup. How did I know that? I have no idea. Maybe I heard something and I just was able to register it even before, I remember. It must have been something like that. So as a result, like we knew all about the commentators. And so once we heard, the great Bill Lawry and Richie Benaud and Ian Chappell, we wanted to know more about them. So again, this is to all the kids listening. This is, you couldn't just go onto Google, as you know, Dan, and find out anything. So we would just find books or find people who knew anything more than we did about those people. I mean, those cricketers. I remember watching the famous Bodyline TV show that they'd made in Australia, wasn't it? It was an
It
Australian
was.
show.
Yes, it
Yep.
certainly was. Yep.
So we got it probably 10 years after it was aired here in Australia. And I remember my brother and I obsessing over it. And I wanted to know more about who this Eddie Painter guy was. Obviously, it was fictionalized a lot. His
Yes.
scene in the movie where he's dragged back from hospital. So again, we just seem to know a lot more about the history. And South Africa came back from their 20-year apartheid when they were shunned from the sporting society, and they came back, I remember. So we got to know a lot about South Africa. And so for example, I remember, all right, Kepler Wessels. So, we didn't know that Kepler Wessels played for Australia. And like then, and then, as kids, you're curious, right? But what do you mean by apartheid? Like, this again, you couldn't just go on the internet and find out. So we had to find someone who would tell us, like, okay, this is what it meant. And this is why South Africa didn't play for 20 years before they were reintroduced in just before the 92 World Cup, when they came and played 3 ODIs in India and all sorts of things. And it helped. I remember in 1994 or 95, they had the first ever big scale Veterans World Cup. So I got to see the likes of, the great West Indians who I didn't grow up on. So I was a West Indies fan from a very young age, from the time I can remember. But that fandom started after their decline had already started. So I hadn't seen the greats of the era that you grew up on, the Holdings and even the Marshalls. Like, I only saw Malcolm Marshall from the 92 World Cup. So he was past his prime at that point. So yeah, I mean, it was the history of the game. It was playing the sport as well. I played it till a decent level. My brother was a good cricketer as well. So we played the sport. We watched the sport. We read about the sport, and that was the only thing. So we weren't a very Bollywood centric family. Like we didn't watch movies. My parents did their own thing. So the other thing I think that really helped was because I come from, I wouldn't say a dysfunctional family, but a household where, as my wife once famously said, when she met all of us for the first time, it was just four individuals living under the same roof. It never felt like a family. But I now, when I look back at it, it was a blessing in disguise. So there were no rules around our house, and when if it came down to cricket, I had all the license in the world, so I could stay up as long as I wanted to. I could wake up whenever I would. My parents were even okay with me skipping school to go watch cricket, even though it wasn't very popular at school. I remember in 1997 there was a Test match India Sri Lanka, and my dad ensured that I went and watched each day of cricket, and
Mm.
which meant me skipping 5 days of school. And
Wow.
the school found out that I wasn't sick, I was going. But even for weirdly, this even the school kind of said, you know what, this kid is obsessed with this sport, we'll just let him be. So again, like I said, it just seems to have been predestined. And yeah, my parents played a big role in that sense, where they just said, look, anything else, like they didn't enjoy me watching wrestling all the time, but when it came to cricket, it was just license. They would go to any extent. And back in the day, you'd find all these old cricket books, even now,
Yes, me
on the
too.
streets. On the streets in India. And my dad would buy me some books, or he would always like just pick up. He wasn't a reader, a voracious reader at all, but he knew both his sons were interested in reading about cricket. So anything cricket came home, and not just him, like anyone in the family, they saw something cricket related, they would just bring it home and give it to me. So yeah, we were very blessed in that sense.
You said that you were an individual, had to be an individual growing up. Do you think that's why you are like you are now with the long hair and the colourful shirts and the colourful pants? And some would say, in a nice way, Bharat, even a little bit like a hippie, because you're
Yeah.
allowed to be who you wanted to be as a kid.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. Because I was given that freedom to, there were no rules. So even so, there were two sides to it. So the good side is I was allowed to do what I was allowed to. I was obviously not allowed to grow my hair in school. It was more a school policy, not a family policy. But as soon as I left school, I started growing my hair. But also, I did go through a pretty bad phase in my life, say between 17 and 21, where I took that freedom to another level where I got, I started doing a lot of drugs. I started drinking a lot. There was teenage addiction issues and other stuff that happened to me. I almost died a couple of times due to
Sure.
overdose. And again, even during those periods, my parents were blissfully unaware of any of this. I mean, they were conservative, religious, teetotaling or teetotalers. And so they didn't understand the concept of alcohol or drugs or anything. And my brother by this time, who I did not have a great relationship with growing up. So he already left for the US, and he was a saint in that sense. So, yeah, so that freedom is what allowed me to become who I am now. But it also did kind of completely, turn me into a wastrel for a period of 3 or 4 years. But thankfully, I bounced back. I stayed alive somehow. And cricket was the only thing that kind of kept me sober and kept me grounded even during that phase. So I've always said, like, I owe my life to cricket, and I don't mean it. I mean, I mean it with the bottom of my heart. I don't think without cricket, I'm sitting here talking to you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here, Bharat. Bharat Sundaresan is my guest on Dashing Down Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. You can get them in 1300 547 777. Dabbling in drugs in some ways, this is probably a perverse way. Has it made you a better person?
I I wouldn't credit doing drugs to anything that happened to me, except the fact that I think surviving 2 overdose episodes definitely has made me a different person. It's made me appreciate life a lot more. And people often ask me, "Oh, you always have that smile on your face. You always seem to be very happy." And I am genuinely very happy to be alive, because I do keep thinking back to those couple of moments, or especially the second time it happened to me. And every time, I if even if there is a hint of me getting carried away with whatever it is, fame or success or whatever, I think back to that moment and say, you shouldn't be alive today. You should have died as a nobody, as a loser all those years ago. And that kind of is a reminder to tell myself that every day is a bonus, and I have so much to be happy for. Starting with the fact that I'm still around and not gone. So yeah, I think so. When you look at it that way, I have no regrets about how my life was, or no regrets about not having grown up in a family where, affection and love and care was all around you. Because who knows what would I would have become. I think I am who I am, like you said, because of my experiences, because of my upbringing. And yeah, it definitely made me more grateful to be alive, but also kind of taught me a lesson that, there is a reason for which I must have been left behind. Like, I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual, but I do believe that, there must be some reason why I didn't die when so many others don't make it, don't get that second chance in life. And I was always able to entertain people. I was always kind of, funny, or, I was able to tell stories a certain way where people were always happy and laughing in my company. So I just decided probably at some point that probably that's my purpose in life, which is why I think, and none of that, probably my eyes wouldn't have opened in that direction if not for, those 3, 4 years where I completely lost myself and almost lost my life.
Are you frustrated, sad, or annoyed, or all three that you don't have a better relationship with your brother?
Not at all, Dan. No, I think we still talk when required, which is like once a year. It could be once in 2 years, or whenever, there's something very transactional to talk about. But no, I haven't. Like, so, because I think probably maybe because it's not that I had family and I lost family. I never really, my parents were really good people, I must say that. I mean, they're really nice people independently, very generous people. So even the generosity that I am blessed with comes from them. Like, we were brought up in a household where giving was considered a duty. Like, whatever you had. Like, the analogy I've always used is, like, if I'm extremely hungry and I finally got a plate of food, we were taught, and I don't think it's a good thing at all, but we were taught that if at that point someone comes and asks for that plate of food, you give it away, because that's the whole point of being a human being. So they were extreme in that sense, my parents. But because I didn't have it, I never really understood it or knew about what it is to be in a family in that sense. I only learned about it over the years, having lived vicariously through having watched other people. And I do believe that, I believe very strongly, I know for some it's a cliche, that like the family that I've been able to build on this planet, wherever I go, and I kind of add to it almost on a daily basis. I love people, I bring people into my life very easily. I think that family seems to matter more to me than, it's not that my father's long gone, but it's not that I don't care about my mother. I mean, we talk quite often, but it's yeah, she's part of that wider family. I don't think there's a distinction in my life where there's my immediate family and everyone else. I think it's all one big family, including my mother, and to an extent my brother as well.
Has that helped you, do you think, develop these great relationships? And I hear you talk about it on the radio and SEN with the Indian players when you got your dream job, someone who loved cricket like you did. You did your journalism degree and then you've gone out on the road to cover cricket. What a job that would have been. And you've
Yeah.
got a great relationship with the Indian players and a great relationship with the Australian players. So do you think because of your childhood in some ways and sort of being allowed to do what you want to do and getting to know a lot of people, that's helped you develop great relationships with those players?
Oh, without doubt. I think, and a lot of people have asked me, oh, how is it that you came from nowhere, or you came from a foreign country and the Australian players have such, or you have such a great rapport with pretty much like, everyone in that Australian team. And I think I always tell them, but what you don't see is I have a very similar rapport with everyone around the cricket ground, whether it's the person who's working security, or the person serving us coffee, or whoever else. Like, I'm a big time, I'm a serial hugger of people. I believe very strongly in that uh, form of, and again, probably it is because I didn't get it as a child. So I've kind of craved it as a human being, as you do. And it's just become a thing. It's my way of showing affection and care for people I know, people I don't know. But it's definitely helped my relationship with the players, because whether I like it or not, I have no other way of treating people the way I want to be treated. And it doesn't matter whether they are the most famous people in the world, or they are not. They're someone who's just going about their everyday business, or they're people, or whatever age they are, or whatever gender, or whatever nationality. I see people as people, and I genuinely love people and having people around me. So I think at some deep level, that has always helped me. So as you can imagine, it's a very different culture in India where cricketers are put on a crazy pedestal. And when you are a journalist, I mean, there would be moments for sure, Dan, where I would get a reality check as to hang on, like here I am having a chat with Virat Kohli and he knows who I am, I know who he is. There are like 100 million people standing outside whose life would be complete if they got one glimpse of him, not just for themselves, but for three generations of their family. They'll tell people, there was one day I saw the Indian team bus went by and Virat Kohli looked at me. That would be a story that would be told and retold in for generations. And there I am personally having a relationship with these people. But that was more like that kind of grounded me. It never made me feel like, oh, I'm someone special or someone better than the 100 million people who are out there. Just my job. Like I've always said, cricket pays their bill. Cricket pays definitely pays all my bills. So I think it's just that human connection, and I've heard this as well from a number of the Australian players, the current ones, former ones, where they say that no, you treat us, we can be ourselves around you. And as a journalist, at times you feel, wait, does that mean I'm doing my job? But I think what they mean by that is they know when I'm a journalist and when I'm not. They can drop their guard, and I really take a lot of pride in it because I believe I'm that kind of person. I'm friends with you because you're my friend. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're a cricketer, you're in good form or you're in bad form. And I do also, if I have a relationship with someone, I will reach out to them in good times and in bad times. Like, there are a number of Australian cricketers, for example, when they're going through a lean patch, not so that they remember me or they think about me when their time the tide turns and they're back in form. But I just feel like everybody needs a cuddle or a pat on the back occasionally. And when you are an athlete at that level, you don't get it. So I just feel like I know the person, so I should just reach out and say, hey, it's okay. I mean, there is always tomorrow. So I guess it's that human connection and those relationships that probably kind of have resulted in me having good relationships with them. But again, yeah, it's just it's a very human relationship. I don't consider it as a journalist cricketer relationship.
You're very good at not crossing the boundary. How have you learnt that?
I think it's just those are just the ethics of journalism that you learn over the years, Dan. I think at the end of the day, having said all of that, I'm still a professional at heart. So
Mm.
I know I because I believe my conscience is clear that I don't have an agenda against anyone. If say I'm writing or commentating about a cricketer who's not doing well, who's had a bad day, I just criticize them the same way I would someone I'm not close to or someone I've never met. But that's just me being a professional. And I think those are things that I was fortunate that I came into journalism at a time. It was still old school journalism. Social media hadn't really come about. So I started in 2008. And as you remember, it was, you wrote for one person, really. You wrote for your boss, your editor, because there was no other feedback that you got about your article. I mean, occasionally someone else in the industry might say, "Oh, that was a good piece that you wrote," but you kind of just wrote. And if my boss said stunning, I felt happy. If he said no, this is not very good, I didn't feel very happy. But that was it. Like it was be all end all. Now, I think it's a challenge for journalists who or people who have come into journalism in the last 10 or 12 years who. There's the social media element to it. So there, you almost even whether you like it or not, you believe there are so many masters, right? Like you have to, and then there's this whole belief that maybe like I've heard this from young or even senior journalists who rely a lot on social media for feedback, saying, "Oh, but I don't want the player to think of me a certain way." I've never had those feelings. If tomorrow I walked into a ground and all the Australian players that you said are who I consider my friends suddenly decide to ignore me, I still think I'll sleep peacefully at night. I don't, ride the wave and make it my identity. I think so. That's one of the main reasons I believe I know what the line is and what not to cross. Where like my space ends and where their personal space starts. But I think that it's come through experience, but also just personality wise. Like I kind of have always known where that line is, and I think it's very important to understand those ethics of our industry and India. And I'm fortunate that I had a boss for 10.5 years in India who kind of guided me the right way, and I had colleagues back then who did that as well. So the you know how it is. Whatever you do in life, if your grounding is very strong, you stay devoted to that. I mean, and my boss, I remember Sandeep Dwivedi with the Indian Express, who's still national sports editor. He said this to me maybe 3 or 4 months into me becoming a cricket journalist in 2008, where he pulled me aside and he said, "Look, till the time you remain a fan of cricket, you will have a long and happy career in journalism. But if the moment you start becoming a fan of cricketers, you will see that you will always be unhappy." And I took it to heart, and
Wow.
not that I needed that uh, to be reminded of that, but I thought that was a great piece of advice I got. And another piece of advice I got from another senior member of the newspaper, the our editorial desk, a guy called Deepak Narayan. He told me, "Look, till the time having a drink 80% of the time with non-journalists and only 20% of the time with your co-journalists, you'll be a happy man." And I've stuck to that as well, Dan. So it's not that I don't have friends in journalism. I have a lot of friends in journalism, but I do try to break away and meet new people, do different things even when you're on a long tour.
Bharat Sundaresan is my guest, well-known cricket journalist and author for Dashing Down Sporting Adventures, thanks to KISS Professional Solutions, and their website is www.kissps.com.au. They're the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria. So you become a cricket journalist, you get your dream job, and then you get to travel the world as a freelancer in a lot of ways after working for the Delhi Express. A lot of money. You'd want to be paid well, Bharat, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was paid more, to be
Mm.
honest. No, I mean, look, it's my wife and I joke about it all the time. Journalist and she's a teacher, probably the worst combination when it comes to if you want to have money and save money and spend money. So, two oh, largely underpaid professions. But having said that, no, I mean, I have no complaints about the opportunities I've got, especially after I've come to Australia. So, when I was in India, I was primarily a writer. So, like you said, the Indian Express I worked for 10 and a half years, following the Indian team around the world. But since I've come here, and full credit to, like, I owe my broadcast career to Adam Collins and Jared Waitley and Mitchell Scott in particular. I mean, they saw something in the way I spoke, and they wanted me to be part of the SEN team. And my role within that SEN team has grown pretty rapidly and quite significantly. And similarly, like, with its ABC Breakfast TV. So I started doing that very early. And the fact that I was allowed to be me, I was just my wild self, the hair, the clothes, the hippie look, and the just the hippie vibe that I bring to television in the morning. The fact that that was not just acknowledged but encouraged to be more me. I think I owe a lot of what my career has become to those people, and obviously in the last 3 or 4 years to Chris Jones and Joel Starchowitz. Oh, I'll say that again: Chris Jones and Joel with Channel 7. They've really, brought me along for the ride and made me part of their family. So yeah, I'm just what Australia has given me is just mind blowing, and I'm thankful and grateful for it every day.
How long has it been since you've had a haircut? And how long do you plan for yourself not to have a haircut? And how does your wife Isha feel about your long, long hair? And we're talking long here, aren't we? I mean,
Yeah.
I've got none, and you've got lots of it.
Well, thank you. Touch wood. And no, I do. My hair, this is the longest it's been in a long time. So I think with my hair, Isha has never seen me without long hair. So I have no idea what that will be like. So I'm not taking that risk. But secondly, what I'm 40 now, I've had long hair since I was 17. But even with the hair, someone the other day asked me if it was religious or fashion. I said it is neither. So going back to my relationship with my brother, which wasn't great when he left for the US, it was my sign of liberation in a way. So that's when I started growing my hair. And even though it took me through some dark tunnels for a while, sort of, for me, it's a reminder of what I've become from who I was growing up. So it's really a part of me, and I take a lot of. It's very special to me, the hair. So, and I do get my head trimmed. So around me, haircut is Isha will tell you, is a term that's not allowed. I don't like the term haircut, but I do get it trimmed. I have my hairstylist, who is a young woman called Sequoia, who runs a salon in Norwood. So she's always taken care of me, or for the last 4 years or so, and I just listen to whatever she says. If she says it's time for a bit of a trim, just a couple of inches here or there, she gets to decide. So yeah, so it's been a long time coming, but this is the longest it's been in a long time. So it's nearly near my waist right now in terms of length. But it takes me back to my heavy metal days when I used to play drums in a band years and years ago. That's when it was this long the last time. So it's generally long, but yeah, this is the longest it's been.
You're a man of many surprises. I was going to touch on the heavy metal. Why heavy metal? And do you have a favourite band, a favourite song? And was it big in India? Certainly reasonably big in Australia.
It, funny enough, started becoming big in when I was that correct age, the right age in my teenage years. So it was still a cultish following for heavy metal, say in the early 2000s, where whichever show or concert you went to, whether it was to perform or to just go and watch, it was the same group of people you would always see. So I think, and I guess heavy metal came into my life, through my brother. I think he started listening to it, but just a bunch of us, my friends, kind of through like, so I remember Iron Maiden was the first heavy metal band I listened to. And then I played it for some of my friends, and then we all got hooked onto it. And then we just went on this metal path. And I would say probably my favorite metal band of all time would be Megadeth alongside Iron Maiden. So very nothing out there of very popular bands, both of them. And yeah, so when we had our little college band, it was mostly a cover band. So we covered a lot of Megadeth and Iron Maiden. And I used to be a vocalist to start with. I had the look for it. But then one of my bandmates, who was a school friend of mine, said no, he wanted to take over as vocalist. So I just started playing the drums. I was fortunate that I grew up in a musical family. So not my father so much, but everyone in my mother's extended family was a musician of some kind. Like, so my mother sang herself classical music, that was Indian classical music. So I was taught a lot of music growing up. I learned to play the violin when I was very young. Then I learned to play the tabla, which is a Hindu or an Indian percussion instrument. So all of that helped me when I started playing music myself, even though it was a very different kind of music. But metal music, most people will tell you, Dan, is very classical in its roots. So yeah, so the drums came kind of naturally to me. And yeah, and then I didn't play the drums for a long time because I always associated it with that druggy phase of mine. But a couple of years ago, I just said, to heck with it. I want to go back to just playing music for myself. I found myself a drums tutor not too far from me in the Adelaide Hills, Paul, who's been amazing. And yeah, so I just walked up to him one day and I said, "Man, just think of me as a child who hasn't never played the drums, and I want to learn to play the drums from scratch." So then through Facebook Marketplace, I've accumulated a drum kit upstairs, and I practice it all the time, and I have a lot of fun with it. And it's very different when you're playing it with no expectation. There's no bandmates. There's no show coming up. I'm just doing it for myself.
You mentioned Iron Maiden. I presume you've seen all the Ozzy Osbourne documentaries. There was a TV show in the early part of this century showcasing him and
Yeah.
his wife Sharon and two of his three children. One of them didn't want to be involved. And then recently, the very sad documentary of his last days before his
Yeah.
death, his last concert in his hometown of Birmingham. And I think he did one song, is that right, at the
Yeah.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when he was inducted. Was he a hero of yours?
Absolutely. And, from the time I heard that when he was a little child or a young man in Birmingham, and that great story of how Tony Iommi and him met for the first time,
Yes.
where there's a knock on Tony's door and Tony's sister says there's a boy standing outside and is walking a shoe. I was like, that's my kind of guy. Yeah. I've never tried walking a shoe before, but yeah, I mean, it's a great pity of mine that I've met a lot of famous people in the world that I never got to cross paths with Ozzy Osbourne or to ever watch him perform live. But yeah, I mean, I did consider him, I wouldn't say a sort of hero, but I always thought of him as a sort of role model where you could just be yourself. I mean, he did some crazy things which I can never imagine myself
Mm.
doing, but just the fact that you don't really need to care about what society thinks of you, about the way you look, about the way you sound, or anything else about you, what you wear. You can just be yourself, and till the time that doesn't impede or impose upon anyone else. It's the kind of freedom I hope everybody enjoys in life. But yeah, so you're absolutely right. Like Ozzy Osbourne, firstly, I mean, without Black Sabbath, there is no metal music, and secondly, the way he lived his life in a way, or just the way he was surely something that I thought, I took it as an inspiration of some kind. Never ever imagining myself living an Osborne life. That was out of question. But yeah, just the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression always kind of, I like that aspect.
Because I'm into the soft rock yacht style music, yacht rock as they call it. But
Right. Yeah.
when I think of heavy metal, I think of Black Sabbath, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. I think of Iron Maiden, which is one of your favourite bands as well. But there are so many of them now, and it
Oh,
seems to be England where they've all started. Why do you think that was the case?
well, I remember watching a lot of documentaries about it, and I mean, Birmingham itself. I mean, that's the whole metal scene. I mean, they say that you could like taste metal, you could because that's where the industrial revolution happened, and you had all the factories and the metal industries in that city itself or around Birmingham. So you see, so many metal bands came from that Birmingham area. And yeah, I think I put it down to again the link between classical music and metal music, because metal music is complex. I mean, you if you want to break a metal riff down, it's very difficult to do it without. It's not just four or five chords played on repeat or in different combinations. It is very complex in terms of the scale and you know. The odd note here and there and how they blend it. So it's complex music, and I think you need a bit of knowledge of classical music, in my opinion, whether it's genuine knowledge or it's just oral knowledge in that sense. So I think that's my takeaway as to why it's come from England, and I guess also the English winter and the English weather plays a role in it. It's got that grim kind of vibe to it, right? I mean, American metal is very different. Like I spoke about Megadeth and Metallica,
Yeah.
so that's different. But it is all kind of it comes from England though. So and I guess you can even take it back to before metal, the likes of Jimi Hendrix, and I think Jimi
Yes.
Hendrix from Seattle, but he found his footing in England. So they liked that kind of deep kind of music, which took you on a journey somewhere, which I guess in many ways is metal music is very different to say your pop music or other forms of music.
And Def Leppard, one of my favourite, I suppose, heavy rock. They're not quite heavy metal,
Yeah.
but they were from Birmingham as well. Though for a long time I thought they were American because of their style of
Yeah.
music with
Yeah.
the album Hysteria. Because even though if you break into in Australia, you break into the English market, it's fantastic. But there seems to be something about breaking into the American market, which
Yeah.
no doubt these heavy metal bands were trying to do, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think because of just the scope in America, I mean, England and Europe was limited back then, and America was the brave new world for during the 70s and 80s, and not just the music scene, but everything around the music scene as well. I mean, the free expression of love and all of that. So America just became that place, the El Dorado. I mean, everyone from the Beatles in the 60s to because you were at Hollywood, not to forget, like you weren't recognized on a global stage unless you made it big in America, which is what makes Hendrix such an outlier because he went the other way to find his true recognition to
Yes.
start with and formed that great bond with Eric Clapton and those guys. So yeah, I think, and I've seen that with Australian bands as well. I mean, AC/DC being one of them, very popular Australian band, but it wasn't before they got that acknowledgement from America that I've heard that they just went to that next level over here as well and around the world. And you see it even now with music acts. I'm not very well versed with the modern music scene, but but you see them a lot focus on capturing the American market and then focusing elsewhere. But it still remains the El Dorado of sorts for musicians, regardless of what genre of music you play.
Leading cricket journalist and commentator and broadcaster and pop culture lover and expert Bharat Sundaresan is my guest on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. You talked about America, big country. Can you ever see in your lifetime cricket having an impact there?
I mean, the ICC or more than the ICC, I think the people who have invested a lot of their own money into franchise cricket are very keen that it does take off. So Major League Cricket, as it's called, MLC, has started to make ripples, but I think it'll take a long, long time. And I think there are a few reasons for that. Firstly, the reason that market is being targeted is because of the increasingly crazy number of South Asian expats there. There have always been many. I spoke about my own brother, and I mean, my brother's a great example. I think he moved there in 2001, I think, or 2002. And I remember this great story of his where he bought his first car. He was still a student, so he was kind of living in somebody's basement, but somehow, like, saved enough money to buy a car. And he got a nameplate because it was the first time he was in a foreign country. So you could just have a customized nameplate. And he just got one which said Tendlya. It was Tendlya. It was one of Sachin Tendulkar's many cute nicknames. And apparently, as the story goes, within a month and a half of that, this rich Indian origin businessman saw the car, came to my brother and bought the nameplate for, I think, $50,000, a crazy amount.
Really?
And that was my brother's first big payday. So, because he wanted to have that, the like Sachin Tendulkar on his car in a way, or his name. So that used to be for a long time for Indians who moved overseas, Sachin Tendulkar in particular, but cricket was part of their identity. So they've carried it with them. And even now, when you look at numbers, Dan, of consumption of cricket content, and I mean like even journalism content, podcast content, and just the our written content, whether it's Cricket Info or Crick Buzz or any of those websites, after India, you'll often see that the second country in that pecking order will be America. It's purely because of the expats who live there, the kind of content they like to consume, the time differences as well. So there's always been a willing market, and there are so many cricket clubs all around the country there. I mean, I met someone recently during the Sydney Test when I was watching the Nets. This father and son, like a white father and son, he brought the son to me, and he said they were from Philadelphia, and it was 45 clubs just within their suburb, and how many opportunities his son has. He had brought him to Australia to play some cricket here during the summer. So there's a huge market there. So I guess that's how it's going to start. And US cricket itself has been so politicized. There have been a lot of fractions and factions and a lot of infighting, but which is why I believe more than the national team, the MLC will take off, and the kind of people who have invested money in it as well, whether it's the CEO of Google or Shah Rukh Khan or the people who run Times Internet, which owns CrickBuzz. So they're the kind of business people who will only invest in a market if they think it's going to grow. So there is a lot of interest there. CrickBuzz, we spoke about, probably the only cricket website who have their own American correspondent because they've invested in US cricket. So it's a market that will take off, but I will be surprised if it's on an international stage or as an international team. It'll be more at that franchise level. And Steve Smith, for example, now lives in New York and he loves playing for Washington Freedom. Ricky Ponting's been coaching that team, and he has a lot of rave reviews about that tournament and the growth and scope for that tournament. So it's coming. That is the big market that cricket hasn't really been able to capture, but it will be captured through T20 franchise cricket.
Is the ICC still too much of a toothless tiger? And does the BCCI, which runs cricket in India, too strong?
I mean, the big question to be asked there is, where does the BCCI end and where does the ICC begin? And yes, Jay Shah, who's was in charge of the BCCI for a while. I mean, he's the son of Amit Shah, who's the second most important person in India. So now that he's headed the ICC, it depends on who you speak to. I mean, there are some people, some administrators who talk about the good things that he's put in place. I mean, the prize money for the Women's World Cup, for example, that just finished. It was what finished a couple of months ago where India won. It was the most prize money for any 50-over World Cup, men or women. So on one hand, you see that, but then there are a lot of decisions that do get made at that ICC level, which seem to, if not favor India, but which kind of take India into equation first, and then kind of you look at how it impacts everyone else. And I guess the bigger question there, Dan, is I know a lot of people in the Western world find it very unfair and feel like it's too skewed. And I've always said to them that on the face of it, it is, but it's just how it's cultural though. The distribution of power and wealth and the understanding of it is so different or where I come from in South Asia to over here. I mean, the whole egalitarianism that runs Australia, where everyone's equal and all of that, doesn't work in that part of the world. So I have spoken to so many BCCI people across the board. I mean, not just the current administration, but over the years, the 18 years that I've been doing this. And it's not that they're all villains who just want to take everything for themselves. At a lot of levels, there is a lack of, I mean, there's just like that cultural disparity in terms of they don't understand, like, wait, but that's not how power or wealth works, right? Like, so there is always a hierarchy, because there is a hierarchy in every aspect of society in India and in Pakistan and those places. And also the other side of the coin is when England and Australia were in power, when they had cricket, where they were, or, where they were calling all the shots. The question that the Indian board will ask is how many people benefited from that? How many test teams did they bring in? How many tours did they make of India? And which is very true. If you look at India coming to Australia, just let's talk about that. Just the fact that between 91, 92 and 99 2000, India did not come to Australia and play any format of cricket,
Oh, that's
kind
right.
of kind of tells you that, so back then the way the cricket worked was you just had the West Indies over all the time because they made money for you,
Mm.
right? And everyone else was just, yeah, we'll see them when we see them. But now it seems unthinkable that an Indian team won't come to Australia more than 2 years, or their tours won't be more than 2 years apart, whether it's white ball cricket or red ball cricket. So I think there's so much more nuance and intricacy, not just to what's happening now, but when you look at the history of cricket administration in the last 50, 70 years. So just to, I find it kind of boring and kind of lazy when people just constantly take shots at the BCCI and Indian cricket and their power without talking about the other things. I mean, that's the obvious bit. I mean, obviously they're taking calls and taking shots that where, with India or the BCCI comes first. It's because of how much money that they bring into cricket. It's because of, and like, I mean, the argument I've heard a lot is, yeah, but they should be sharing it. But that's just not how power and money and wealth works in that part of the world. So to completely dismiss that idea and say, no, no, we're not going to hear that. You should think like us. I think in some ways uh, is is the case of people here being obstinate and not being open to other ideas and other ideologies, and it's the same you can say about those people as well. I mean, for not coming to the table and having that. But I think it has to come from the other boards or people who talk a lot about cricket and policy in Australia and England, to kind of at least speak to people from South Asia and leave cricket aside, understand the philosophies and the cultural aspects to it before they start having these informed opinions of what's happening in cricket.
Because technically outside India, it's still a very conservative game. This is why Kerry Packer took over in the late 70s, because the Australian Cricket Board just did things one way, and they were run by a
Mm.
whole lot of businessmen who loved the game, and I think it was all about them with the greatest respect.
Yeah.
And England was the same as well. And that still seems to exist a bit, doesn't it? I mean, you can just see in Australia, England have gone a different step, haven't they, with the 100, a new concept.
Mm.
The Big Bash in Australia is held during the summer and many players are unavailable. But in India, which concerns me a little bit, Bharat, they've made it a massive tournament and only the great players can play in it and the best players, and they don't have any test cricket during that time. Are you concerned that the T20 concept is taking over from test cricket and will continue to take over from test cricket?
No, I don't think it'll ever completely take over from it. It will. It does run the cricket calendar in many ways. I do believe strongly that India, Australia, England will remain largely unaffected by where it's going. I mean, just the fact that India are now playing 5 match series against both Australia and England, home and away, kind of tells you that they're playing more Test cricket than not. And so those three countries, because of just structurally how cricket is, and I don't think Test cricket in those countries will ever be directly impacted or will change the way Test cricket is run. I mean, Australia and England still remain the only two countries where Test cricket, like broadcast-wise, at least Australia, I know for a fact that Test matches still get more money than white ball cricket when it
Mm.
comes to broadcast deals. So I think the big turning point that has happened in cricket is the IPL, and the only reason I say that is not even to do with what happens on the field. But it was when the BCCI at that point and people in charge decided to bring in these these rich industrialists and people from Bollywood and other facets and gave them a piece of the cricketing pie. I know not all, but some of them probably expected that, yeah, I mean, they will always remain under our thumb when it comes to cricketing things, and we will continue to run this sport the way we like to run it. And, the Indian cricket team will always remain paramount. But what they probably didn't realize is when you are asking people like them who are business people for a reason, like, they make business deals. They don't only, they can't think about even as I'm not saying that they're not interested in cricket, but they're only going to make investments and make deals which result in profits, right? I mean, it's not romance for most of them. So once you brought them into the ecosystem, it was only going to be a matter of time before they asked for a seat on the table. And for the longest time, I think there was some resistance to that. But now you're saying that that resistance is finally broken in terms of how they've gone and bought a lot of teams in other countries or started other T20 leagues themselves. So I think it'll go to one extreme before it comes back. I do see a world going forward in the next few years, Dan, where Test cricket will still be Test cricket, where some countries will not play as much as, say, India, Australia, England, but there will be three or four major T20 leagues, and it's happening. And the other big change that has happened, and it has already started impacting a lot of these T20 leagues, is more to do at a government level. In a few months ago in India, when they decided to ban and stop all fantasy cricket games where you cannot. I mean, betting's illegal in India, but you could still pay and play fantasy cricket. So that's all banned, and already that's impacted a lot of these fringe T20 leagues around the world, because without this market, they don't exist. So you'll see that it'll be the IPL will be the IPL. But once there is private investment in the BBL, you'll see there'll be a big league in India, there'll be a big league in South Africa, in Australia, in England, and then there'll be the CPL has been going on for a while. The PSL will have its own space, but I think there will be more a finer filter in terms of how many of these there are. And I still don't see people have been talking about the death of Test cricket for 100 years now, right? Like when one day cricket came, or even before then, like you go and read scripts or journalism pieces from the 50s and 60s, for whatever reason. When the West Indies started bowling a lot of bouncers, people said this is the death of Test cricket. So there's always been, I guess that's just an extension of society, isn't it, Dan? We all think the doomsday, like, the world comes to an end with me. So that will always be there, but I don't see Test cricket completely going away at all, because I still think the people who matter care a lot about Test cricket.
Leading cricket journalist and broadcaster Bharat Sundaresan, who appears regularly on SEN in Melbourne. We'll get to his wrestling and cricket show shortly. What's a bigger Test series now, Australia and India? In Australia, considering all the expat Indians that live here, or the Ashes?
Look, I mean, the fact that the last three India-Australia series or Border Gavaskar series on Australian soil have been ultra competitive, especially the last two ones. 2018-19, Australia were without Smith and Warner. They were coming off Sandpaper Gate, and you saw it. India won their first ever series. They just looked like a weaker team. But 2020-21, that crazy series, which I wrote a book on, which was COVID, and India just somehow found a way of winning. And then last summer, where Australia finally won back the Border Gavaskar Trophy after 10 years, and the way they did it with the series alive till the last session of the last test, it kind of tells you, purely from a cricketing point of view, India Australia is the ultimate rivalry in Test cricket. The Ashes, it's always exciting when we go to England, like in 2000, the two that I've done over there, 2019 and definitely 2023. But after all the hype and hoopla leading into this summer that's just gone by, or this Ashes series just has gone by, it was such a disappointment to see the way England went down, and the fact that, yeah, baseball or not, it just kind of felt like it was just another English team who just weren't good enough to compete against Australia and Australia. So that was basically the bottom line. Like, their style of play was just hype, or just kind of was part of it. It didn't really play much of a role. So you have to say that, and as the great Crash Craddock says, He's been doing this for 40 years and he's yet to see a close Ashes series on Australian soil. Even the times England have won the last two times, they've won it quite outright. So, yeah, I think there will always be the history and the shared history of the Ashes, which will kind of every time the Ashes is around, people will talk it up. But everybody knows that, or what we've seen historically, or not historically, in the last 15 or so years, is it's only when India and Australia meet on Australian soil that it feels like the cricket is very close and it is competitive.
Well, the 2021 series, which I think we're going to talk about forever, aren't we? I mean,
Yeah.
India was bowled out. I remember broadcasting a Premier Cricket match involving Casey South Melbourne in Melbourne, and you'd look up at the TV, another wicket, another wicket, another wicket. India got bowled out for just over 30, and you thought there is no way back. I mean, as an Indian cricket follower and supporter, what did you think after that test match? Did you think they'd get wiped away?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been an Indian cricket supporter, so I correct you on that. Always West Indies, but
Oh, okay, but I mean, you are of course from.
I don't.
You're still the West Indies now, despite the fact, Bharat, they've won about 2 tests in the last 20 years.
Yes, I have. I'm stuck with them. I've always rallied around the West Indies. No, but no, you're right. I mean, it's it's that series was like, yeah, the 36 all out, Virat Kohli leaving. I mean, I remember being there at the Adelaide Oval for a couple of hours after that game was over, and it was surreal to just see the Indian team, the way they left that ground. Mohammad Shami had his arm broken, and you really did not think that they would be able to come back. I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say, because they lost their best fast bowler, they lost their captain. So I think it was quite something that they were able to come back and win the next test match. The Brisbane test win and the draw in Sydney were remarkable, but the fact that they were able to go and win the Boxing Day test still remains one of the most extraordinary test matches I've seen. And it just kept getting better and better. By the end, they were using net bowlers to play test matches. And yeah, it was a crazy time in the world. And it was just one of those series where you knew when you were a part of it, covering it and on radio and writing about it, talking about it on TV and all that, that you knew that you're never going to get another series like this. So you kind of knew that it's like one and done. It's one of those miracle series or miracle events in sport that won't repeat itself.
India have had some of the greatest batters of all time, and they're worshipped like Kohli, Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, even Sourav Ganguly, Virendra Sehwag. Have you seen a better innings, though, by Ajinkya Rahane in that Melbourne test?
Mm.
That was white knuckle stuff, wasn't it?
It was. It totally was. No, I remember at that time calling it probably one of the most important hundreds by an Indian batter away from home, and it was. I mean, the context that you use there, 36 all out, they lost. I remember writing they lost their captain, they lost their fast bowler, and they lost their pride and their dignity after the way they were defeated in Adelaide. And to go from there for Ajinkya Rahane to take over that team and to play that kind of innings in very tricky conditions. I remember on day one when India bowled Australia out cheaply. The pitch had moisture, but the sun was shining. And the next morning, it was cloudy. It felt like a bowling day, and Australia bowled really well. But Rahane just found a way and played one of the great innings. When you put it into perspective, I think it's in the top 3 greatest innings played by an Indian on Australian soil.
You've written a book on MS Dohni, who is the greatest one-day cricketer I've ever seen. He is ice cool. I mean, he could be 25 off 60 balls, and you're saying absolutely no chance. He used to love to chase, didn't he? And he would get them over the line comfortably. He's a pretty good test player as well.
Yeah.
What made him tick? And should he be put, and is he put, I mean, you'd know more about it over in India, in the same category hero-wise as Bumrah, as Kohli, as Tendulkar, etc.?
No, he definitely is. So I think so it's like there's a Tendulkar era and then there's the Virat Kohli era, and he kind of is the bridge between those two eras. Say from the time he burst onto the scene and took over one India that T20 World Cup as captain, the World T20 as it was called, the first ever one, which led to the concept or yeah, I mean, that's what led to the IPL being born. So no, I think he does get his due in that sense. I think he's just an enigma. That's what the book is about. It is a cricketing book, but it's more about just the enigma of the man, and he just thought differently. He just played cricket differently, and he just had these very unique approaches to how you play everything, like the from his wicket keeping to his batting to his captaincy was all a bit out there, but it worked. And I think Indian cricket needed someone like him. I mean, it was full of superstars. They needed an outsider like him to come and be this unconventional star in his own right, but he did it so differently, and he kind of was able to bring everyone together. And that famous 2011 World Cup win on Indian soil, the bizarre end to his test career in Melbourne when he just did a press conference and then later sent a press release from the BCCI sent a press release an hour later saying he's retired. He just did things very differently. And the fact that he's still going on, and long may his IPL career continue, because the longer he plays, the more my book sells and the more royalties I make.
That's important, isn't it?
That's the most
It's like
important
a
thing.
singer. It's like all the heavy metal bands. As long as their albums keep selling, the money keeps coming through, doesn't it? You made a good point.
Absolutely.
You made a good point about these Indian teams now with a lot more talent. I mean, when I was growing up, there was Sunil Gavaskar. Then Kapil Dev came into the team. The great Ravi Shastri, great broadcaster, great coach, great player. He was part of some good teams. Muhammad Azharuddin. But nowadays, there's a lot more talent, isn't there, that have come through and made India a lot more competitive and generally one of the best test nations in the world. Why is that, you think?
No, I think a lot has changed in Indian cricket. It's just become a more confident nation. It's become a more confident cricket nation for sure. And there was always talent. And I think once you started seeing more and more players from other cities and like the smaller towns and the smaller cities come through, like it felt like for the longest time, probably till the time, say, I mean, MS Dhoni is credited with being the first rural superstar in that sense, but I think there were a few before him as well, Kapil Dev being one of them, and a few others. But it was largely concentrated in the metros. So it felt like that tap of talent, which, lay in the vast expanses of India beyond the metros, wasn't tapped into or wasn't like opened up. But once that started, it started with a drip in the early 2000s. And then the IPL just, saw like the Indian cricket being flooded with talent from all corners, and which is what has led to, this incredible conveyor belt of super talent coming through in white ball cricket and red ball cricket as well. I mean, they're going through a bit of a weird phase right now, India, where they're not winning a lot of test matches. But no, I mean, the fact that the probably the most popular cricketer right now after Virat Kohli is Jasprit Bumrah, a fast bowler. I mean, who would have ever thought that would happen in Indian cricket? But no, things have changed a lot. And like you said, I mean, the power dynamics also have played a big role in that, where they just believe that, they have the best facilities, they have the access to, the system itself. The grassroots is so strong. I mean, that has always been the case. Even when I was coming through the ranks in Mumbai in the 90s, the grassroots, the system is so strong that it's a rinse and repeat. So if you are a talented cricketer, you will come through and you will rise to the top. It's just that there's a lot of competition that you have to come through. So which is why you'll see a lot of these players who make their debuts for India will end up averaging like in their 60s and 70s, and like, the Shubman Gills and the Sarfaraz Khans and the Jaiswals of the world right now. And that's always been the case. Unless you average in the 60s, like who was the last test batter to make his debut for Australia who was in averaging in the 50s? Forget the 60s and the 70s. So it's a different system over there. And I think all those things have resulted, all those factors have resulted in what India has become now as a cricket team.
Adam Voges is that player. Wouldn't surprise me if Steve Smith gets there as well, but it was a pretty small sample from Adam, 20 tests, and he had success against the West Indies and New Zealand and a few of those nations, but you can't take that away from him.
Yeah.
Virat Kohli's test average was under 50. Sachin Tendulkar's test average was over 50. You grew up watching Tendulkar, and then you started your career covering him and his back end. You covered all of Virat Kohli's career. Who's the biggest superstar in India?
I think overall it will always be Sachin Tendulkar, and I think Virat Kohli will be the first person to tell you that because he really put India on the map, and I don't think we've ever seen anyone anything like Sachin Tendulkar and what he did for that country through the 90s, and at a time where India was opening up to the world. India as a country needed a global superstar, and Sachin was that guy, just the way he was on and off the field. And you're right. I mean, Virat Kohli's test average did get impacted a lot because of some of the pitches that
Yeah.
he had to bat on Indian soil in the last 4 or 5 years of his career, where batting averages just started dropping rapidly. But yeah, I mean, overall cricketing superstar will always be Sachin Tendulkar. But I guess Virat Kohli in the 21st century probably superseded Sachin in terms of, just the fandom. But the metrics have changed, right? I mean, there was social media in the Virat Kohli era. I mean, when you look at the number of followers he has, it's scary. I mean, those are numbers that, even the big American superstars have never heard of. So he's in that Cristiano Ronaldo, Federer, like, he's in that bracket when it comes to that. So yeah, I mean, purely in terms of numbers, in that sense, yeah, it's Kohli. But I don't think anyone who grew up in India in the 90s will ever say any name except Sachin Tendulkar when it comes to the biggest cricketing superstar India has ever produced.
When did you start following the Australian team? Was that when Isha settled in Adelaide and finished her degree at Flinders
Yeah.
University? And obviously, you follow them closely now. How do you reckon the Australian team has developed and evolved in the time that you've been covering them?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting phase for them as well. So I came here in 2008, like you said, as soon as, I got Isha finished her master's, got a job, and I moved here. And so they were just coming off Sandpaper Gate. So my first summer here as an Australian journalist was when India came and won their series here. So it was kind of bizarre thing for me where I'd been an Indian journalist till like 3 days before then. So to suddenly, so I largely still remained an Indian journalist in that sense. But yeah, and that was just, I mean, the start of Justin Langer's era. So I saw the Justin Langer era through and through, at least from his first home summer onwards. And then, Tim Payne was captain at that point. He'd just taken over. So I saw the whole transition between the Payne Langer to the McDonald Cummins era. And I would say that it's just such a worldly Australian team. I mean, they have seen a lot of the world. It's a very chilled out Australian team, very mature. Most of them are such genuinely nice people, happy people. So it's been a privilege just traveling the world alongside them and like covering them and writing about them and commentating their cricket. So yeah, it's probably not as indomitable as that great Australian team from the turn of the century was, but they won such big events. Like the 50 over World Cup final is still one of the greatest days of cricket I've covered when they won in Ahmedabad, and so many Indian people were silenced as Pat Cummins promised they would be. And then the World Test Championship win at the Oval, when I don't think they went in as favourites for that game, and just even retaining the Ashes a couple of times over there. It's been a good run, but I think next year will be the big one. Like if for a lot of them, it will be their sort of their swan song, if not their farewell. And if they can win in India and in England, then their legacy will be fulfilled because that's also when Andrew McDonald's tenure ends with the next 50 over World Cup, where Australia will be defending champions. But from that point on, you wonder how long Pat Cummins will remain as captain. I'm sure he'll play on for a while, but next year will be huge, red letter year if they can turn it into one for this Australian team and their legacy.
How do they stagger the retirements?
That's a very good question. I think now that in the last 3 years or 3 summers they've lost Warner and Khawaja, you think Steve Smith's the interesting one. How much Test cricket does he have left? He himself doesn't know, and he is very honest when he says that. He is taking it series by series, so we'll have to wait and watch how much Test cricket he's got left. Again, I think it's the carrot that's dangling in front of them of ticking that box of winning a series in India and winning a series in England. And then there's also, then the fast bowlers. Josh Hazelwood is a concern because of how often he's been injured and I'm missing another home summer. So his motivation to continue playing Test cricket will be keen to keep an eye on. Mitch Stark's been very clear that he'll go on till the next year, 2027. So I think whichever way you look at it, the next summer, 26, 27 against New Zealand, in all likelihood would be the last home summer for at least Stark and Lyon, because I can't see them continuing in 27, 28. So those two, I mean, I'm sure, like I said, last summer on Australian soil, but they want to continue and play in India and England. So I guess it'll happen more organically rather than, because even though we think of them as being the same age, there is a bit of a gap between Cummins and Hazelwood and Stark. And Hazelwood's run of injuries may probably, the decision might get made for him in that sense. His body might make the call for him. But with Stark and Lyon, like 2 years from now, 2 summers from now, they are not playing for Australia. So, or you would think so. So I think it'll just take care of itself in that sense, Dan.
And the next best bowlers are both in their mid-30s. Scott Boland, star at 36, and Michael Neese has been doing his job despite, again,
Yep.
a small sample at 35.
Absolutely. And I think that'll be the big challenge also of who will be captain at that point when the next batch comes in. So, you'd think Cummins will have 3 more years at least of Test cricket, if not more. And then it comes down to, because there is talent for sure. I mean, you watch Shield cricket, there is fast bowling talent coming through, under 19 cricket as well. Just watching Marley Beardman, who's talked of highly, bowling the other day for the Scorchers, you could see there is genuine talent. It's just a question of when they get their opportunities and how they're brought in. And also, which is why I think Australia would love for Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins and Lyon to be around till the end of next year's Ashes, because then they have a bit of a leeway to build for, that the next big challenge, which would be India back here at the end of 28, 29. So they'll have like 18 months to kind of rebuild that team. So I think that would be ideal. That would be utopian if it works out for them. And in that period, you'll get Lance Morris back. You'll get young Callum Vidler back from injury, and others coming through as well. So I think that's how they will be looking at building it. But yeah, I mean, which is why there'll be more and more interest in what happens in the Sheffield Shield.
You're worried about the batting. I mean, Sam Constas clearly was picked too early. I know he was ramping Jasper Bumrah, and like all journalists, or most journalists, I don't think you're in the same boat. I know you were impressed with what he did, and I think we all, well, not so much me. I just thought it was one innings. Okay, give the boy a chance to settle in. But the batting to me is a bit of a concern. Jake Weatherall, you did a magnificent piece, by the way, on Channel 7 about his mental health battles with him and his wife. Not sure he's at the level. Marnus Labuschagne's a bit inconsistent. We know Travis Head's a star. We know Steve Smith's a star. Alex Carey's a very good wicketkeeper batter. Chris Green, or Cameron Green, I should say, the jury's out with him. And Bo Webster's a fair player, but there are some issues with the batting. A lot of young players, but maybe they're not quite ready yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, there are a lot of question marks. Like Australia, we haven't really learned much about this Australian team, despite the big Ashes win. So there are a lot of questions that still remain, which is why I think the big glut of Test cricket that's coming up for them from August onwards, and 24 tests in 18 months or whatever that crazy number is, will test the selectors, the coaching staff, and I mean, if you're a young or a seasoned Australian batter right now in the circuit, that's also an opportunity for you to cement yourself in that team. So now that Travis Head has become a test opener, I don't see them moving on from him. So there are spots in that middle order. I mean, Usman Khwaja is gone, so there are spots that will open up. And I do believe, as someone who watches a lot of Shield cricket, that there are talents coming through, whether it's young Campbell Kellaway or a much younger Ollie Peak, who's leading Australia in the Under-19 World Cup. And there's Jason Sangha in South Australia. There are others as well. Like, I mean, just coming through the ranks and making an impression. So, yeah, but the big question will be, how many of them do you bring together, and how long that transitional phase will last? Because it's come how it's happened. The batting wise, it's happened a couple of times for Australia, and that just after Ponting and Hussey left, and then once again in that 2016-17 period where they lost to South Africa on home soil. So hopefully they'll be hoping that they don't have too many spots to fill in that transition going forward once we get to August. And by the time, say, they are in India and England next year, most of those batting slots or batters have cemented themselves.
Great to have Bharat Sundaresan join me talking cricket. We'll get to some wrestling very soon. We were speaking about heavy metal music as well. He's a man that has a number of different interests. Do you think this Australian team get too involved in off-field issues and political issues, and that they should just stick to the sport, stick to cricket?
I've never been a believer, Dan, of athletes being asked to stick to what they do. I think they are representatives of the country that goes beyond what happens on the field, and not all of them do much of that. I mean, Pat Cummins is a prime example of someone who believes strongly in talking about what he believes in, whether it's climate or other things that he talks about. And I remember saying this on Offsiders once on the ABC a few years ago. When I said that if you're saying that Pat Cummins is the face of Australian cricket, but you're saying he shouldn't have a voice, and I said, what's the point of having a face if it doesn't have a voice? So I believe strongly that people, especially in their position, should be given a voice or platform to voice their opinions. I mean, whether they want to do it or not, it completely rests on their shoulders. But I don't see a problem with them being open, because otherwise, if we aren't really making the best use of them as a society, not so much as a sporting team. I mean, they are performers, they are entertainers, but they also do have access to the rest of the world that a lot of people in Australia don't. So if you are a Pat Cummins and you are spending 2 months every year in India during the IPL, and you're seeing what is happening around the world in terms of change, good and bad, and if you aren't then pushed to talk about it, are we making the best use of him as a role model for the next generation? So I personally always believe that, it's important to hear them as well. Like Usman Khwaja, his press conference where he brought me into it as well, the race issues and all of that. That's a lived experience that I think it's very important that all colored people and white people in this country listen to, because Australia is changing. So if someone of some status or at someone with the credentials that Usman Khwaja has is telling you that this is what I've experienced, I think it's a good thing. And more people can learn about, okay, this is what it feels like to be a brown person in a largely white dominated field, which is cricket in Australia. And this is how I can change my outlook. Or if you're a colored person, okay, this is what I can learn as to how I approach it. So I think it's good that these people are given a voice.
He's polarised a lot of people, Usman, but he doesn't seem, you know him pretty well, he doesn't seem
Yeah,
too phased by that, does he?
no, not at all. No, I don't think he is. And I think it comes with maturity, just being
Mm.
more and more confident in your own skin. Like I've learned about it personally as well. So no, I think, yeah, he's pretty unfazed by it.
Now, you talked about Adam Collins and Gerard Whateley earlier. Adam Collins, like you, travels around the world following cricket. He just loves it, doesn't he? I mean, it's an interesting story with him, isn't it? That he finds the money, he finds the sponsors, he finds the team, and he's able to get a good business arrangement going with SEN and calls the cricket. What a job for him.
It is. And to come from a political background like he has, to follow his passion, so in his case, it's genuinely someone who's followed his passion. In my case, like I said, it was happenstance that I became a journalist. So he is pursuing a dream job of calling cricket. And I mean, he does it so well in the company of Jared Waitley. And I've been very fortunate to call Adam a great friend of mine, but also to travel the world with him. Because on the road for SEN, we are often, or more often than not, he's the main caller. I'm the main color guy. So we are the tag team that takes SEN listeners around the world on a ride, so on a journey. So no, I mean he's a special person, and yeah, I mean he is. To say that he's obsessed with cricket might be the biggest understatement in the world, because he really does love it, and the amount of cricket he plays as well. So no, I mean he's a true cricket tragic, and I'm so glad that he gets to do what he loves doing.
Would you like to be a ball by ball commentator like Adam, like Gerard? I've done a bit of it, like the great Jim
Yeah.
Maxwell, Jonathan Agnew.
I've dabbled in it. I've done so in the West Indies last year, where Adam had to go back home and he lost his voice during the second test. So I doubled up as a caller as well. But I've been told by Jared, by Adam, that I mean, I'm in a unique position as it is. considering I'm not a former test cricketer or a first class cricketer, but I get to be the expert commentator, the color commentator. So that's my true calling. I've been told by those two in particular who I really look up to. So I enjoy doing that, but I enjoy my ball by ball as well. Like, to see the way they do it, especially on commercial radio, where you can you have to pull out the sponsors as well.
Yes.
But just leading the chat, like, yeah, it comes pretty naturally to me. So no, I wouldn't mind doing that. But like I said, Dan, like, I'm not unlike an Adam Collins or those others. Like, I really, there was no plan that I would get to where I have. Like, I literally take every day as it comes. So if tomorrow I end up being more a caller than a color guy, I'll embrace it the same way I've embraced being the color commentator.
How many colourful shirts have you got, and how many colourful pants have you got?
Well, my wife complains that we keep adding to it all the time, even though she's guilty more than I am of buying me clothes. So, no, I mean, plenty. I give away quite a few as well as mementos, not as much as the great Peter Walsh used to, but
Yes,
I
what a
still
great
do
man
that.
he is. Shout out to
He
Walshy,
is
great
very
mate
much.
of mine.
I mean, I've known Walshy for a long time. And when Isha moved here, she didn't know anyone in Adelaide. I only knew Walshy. So he was a great friend to her for the 2 years that she lived by herself. So, no, Walshy has played a big role in our Australian journey. So big shout out to him. But yeah, so I think, yeah. I mean, my wardrobe is quite ridiculous. I mean, one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken is last year in Sri Lanka, Pete Lawler, who I'm sure you know really well as
Knowing
well,
well, yep.
and I shared an apartment in Gaul, just outside the stadium, and so we would alternate our laundry days. And he did his laundry, and everything was black. And the next day, I had my washing out, and everything was colorful. So it's a great picture. You can find it on social media. So yeah, I've always loved my color. It's just that I don't believe that everything should match. Isha used to back in the day. Now it's just a clash of colors and designs and all sorts of things.
I went through a long distance relationship in Perth when my then fiance was in Melbourne for a year. You did it for 2 years. I know you were traveling the world as well, but you were based predominantly in India. And as you said, Isha was here in Australia. Obviously, it stood the test of time, but how challenging was it
Yeah.
at the time?
Well, it was very challenging because we don't come from money. So there was, we both knew that we wouldn't be able to see each other. So I came once during that period. I saw her for 10 days. I came to Adelaide. I saved up enough money to come and in September of that year. But that is all we saw of each other for 2 years. So it was
Wow.
not easy. Yeah. And the time zones as well. Because I was traveling so much, it was all over the place. So yeah, we powered through. It was a few difficult years there, but we had a goal in mind to give ourselves a chance. We took a huge gamble on ourselves, on our marriage, on very little that we had, and somehow it all worked out. So we are very blessed in that sense.
Absolutely. Now, you did some cricket umpiring as well. Do you like that? And were you allowed to wear colourful shirts, or you had to stick to the uniform?
No, I still stick to the uniform, but I do always wear a colorful T-shirt, and I have like a couple of colorful bracelets that my niece makes for me.
Good.
I have my colored nails always, so there's still
Oh.
some color there. But no, I stick to the uniform, and I've been told I look pretty good in a uniform, which I guess you would say when you've never seen me in just plain colors. So no, I love my umpiring. It gives you a great insight into what really happens. You're like, that's a close up view of, I know it's a different level of cricket, but at every, like, at many levels it's all the same thing, batting and bowling. It's just that they do it at different quality. At the highest level it's a different quality here, but you get to know and understand so much about the intricacies of just those little things that you miss out when you're watching it from a distance, like you are in the commentary box.
Are the umpires too reliant on the referral system now? I certainly noticed early in the series between Australia and England that the umpires in the first couple of tests were a little bit shy to make a decision, weren't they, if they got a couple wrong, as they did early on?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's changed the game completely. Wherein, like, there's just I don't know whether it's an over reliance or not. It's just elite umpiring has changed so much. I know a few of them pretty well, and And also the different kinds of technology that gets used as well, which is different everywhere, as we saw the snicko controversy during this summer. So yeah, it's never been easy being a cricket umpire, but feels like with more and more technology it's become even more challenging, and you get judged a lot more.
And before we finish, why wrestling? And obviously it's WWE wrestling, which I'm not into. It's not my cup of tea, but it's obviously
Yeah.
your cup of tea. And I don't know how you've done it, but you're a genius. You have managed to put together your two loves, cricket and wrestling, on a show on SEN. I mean, you couldn't have two different sports, could you not?
Yeah, you would have thought so, Dan, but we've realized over time, Eric Bischoff, who was a wrestling icon,
Yes.
who ran WCW in the 90s and almost ran Vince McMahon out of business. And he doesn't know much about cricket, but we became friends a few years ago and we really hit it off. And he was the one who suggested that, could see cricket and wrestling come together. And we floated the idea here and there. And then Craig Hutchison, was also a wrestling fan, got wind of it and he said, I am going to make this happen and it'll be a show on SEN. So we're very thankful to him. And it's funny how we recorded our weekly episode this morning. It should air in the next few hours. It's funny how much they do come together because they're two, like, it's all about storytelling, isn't it? Wrestling for me has always been about storytelling. Obviously there's a lot that happens in the ring and the scripted nature of what is pro wrestling, but it's just long-term storytelling. So for example, you take this current Ashes, the baseball, whichever way you look at it, whatever you want to call it, was born from the humiliation from 4 years ago where they lost here and lost in the Caribbean. And it was all about making or coming up with a approach to Test cricket, which would kind of make England fun again for their own fans. And then eventually, so that when they come back in 4 years, they can finish the story by beating Australia. So that is a wrestling angle, if you think about it. That's how wrestling angles are written, wrestling stories are written. It's all about episodic but long term stories. And I've always been fascinated by it. And I'm so fortunate that I get to not just share a podcast stage with the great Eric Bischoff, but I get to dabble in it myself. And so far, I've been an on and off part of Melbourne City Wrestling, but going forward this year, it looks like I'll be a more integral part, and I'm really looking forward to it. As I've generally played the villain in the ring, I love being booed by people. It's good fun. It's different to what I generally am in the real world, so it's a lot of fun.
Have you got a character name yet? And who was your favourite wrestler growing up?
For now, I play myself. I do play myself as the cricket guy. I carry a cricket bat to the ring, which I
Right.
have used or which I have used when I shouldn't be as the villain that I am, without getting hurt myself. Growing up, my favorite wrestler was a guy called Razor Ramon, who
Yeah.
his real name was Scott Hall. Jumped on board the WCW and formed the NWO with Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash. And so he was always my favorite. And, so I had this special moment. The first time I ever was in the ring and I had to cut a promo, Eric Bischoff was there backstage in Ballarat. And I asked Eric if I could borrow Scott Hall's famous promo from that first day he walked on to into a WCW ring. And Eric blessed me, said, Scott's no more. But if he was here, he would have loved you and he would have allowed you to use the line. So it was like my world just came together at that point. So yeah, he was my favorite wrestler and he still remains my favorite wrestler of all time.
I might have missed a few, but I'll name 4 cricket grounds and I'd love to get your view on them. Eden Gardens in India, Adelaide Oval in your hometown of Adelaide, the MCG, and Lords. Is there a ground I've missed? Because I reckon you've just about been to every test playing ground in the world.
I've covered Test cricket I've not covered Test cricket in Zimbabwe, but I have been to Zimbabwe and covered one day cricket. But yeah, except Ireland and Afghanistan, I've covered Test cricket in every other country. So I've been very fortunate. And I've been to all the major Test grounds for sure. Yeah, Eden Gardens, I'm from Mumbai originally. So Wankhede was always home to me, my home ground. I played cricket there. I've covered a lot of cricket there. But yeah, the Eden Gardens is special, but I would have preferred going to the Eden Gardens of old when they used to have 100,000 people there. I've only been to the remade Eden Gardens, which is good, but it's not the same. Lords is Lords. I mean, the same question gets asked about me every time I go to Lords is how do I follow the dress code? I never have. And it was quite poetic that this last year when I went there for the World Test Championship final, the MCC had like a rowing photographer who was taking pictures. They called it, I think, the fashion of Lords or something like that. And I was one of the people who was photographed. I was wearing these fairy winged socks as well. So it was I guess like it was my answer to Lords for all those years that my dress code has been questioned. The fact that I was photographed as one of the models representing the fashion sense of Lords. I mean, Adelaide Oval, greatest ground in the world, in my opinion. I'm biased, but every time I fly in, like I did 2 days ago, and I will next week, and I sit on the window seat to the left and see the Adelaide Oval just as we are landing, I pinch myself and tell myself how lucky I am to call this my home. It's just the prettiest cricket ground been to. And the MCG is just a beast, isn't it? It's an arena.
Well,
It
it
feels
is.
special
Yeah.
every time you've been there. I've been very fortunate to watch some AFL or be on the ground for a Carlton Collingwood game last year. And it was the kind of road that I've never heard ever at the MCG to be there for so many Boxing Day test matches now, that special India-Pakistan T20 World Cup game in 2022 alongside Jared. So a lot of special memories from that ground. And that's just some Madison Square Gardens of world cricket.
And you love your AFL, which of course is huge at the MCG, as you touched on. You're an Adelaide Crows supporter. I won't hold that against you. I'm a Western Bulldog supporter, and they're not going that well either. When you first started following the game, did it surprise you how passionate people are about AFL? And do you think they're as passionate about their AFL here as Indians are about their cricket in India in particular?
More.
Really?
More, Dan. Like, no. I mean, that whole thing of cricket as a religion in India is always a myth. I mean, cricket is the biggest escape for Indian people, but footy is a proper religion. The fact that people of all ages follow it the same way. I mean, I've seen grandmothers and great grandsons and all sit together, or Nonna with her scarf, and all abuse the umpire with the same choice words. It's a true religion. Like when it comes to how devoted footy fans are. And again, I'll correct you. I'm officially nobody's fan. I'm a
I
fan of
thought
all
I thought
clubs.
you were an
I've worked
Adelaide
with
Crows fan.
well, a lot of a lot of people who are fans of different clubs assume that I have committed. Like, I know Adam Collins is convinced I'm a Hawthorn fan. I mean, I have written about them. I like what Hawthorn do, but I've done stuff with other teams as well. So I'm still in the market. And at some level, I wonder if I do need to pick a team. I know it's a very Australian thing to pick a team, but the role that I play for the AFL, I think for now I'll leave it at that. But I've done stuff with the Bulldogs. Amit Benz does such a great job there for the club. They were the first club I did any content with last year, with James Harms, who taught me how to kick the ball, and James O'Donnell, Simon's son, who taught me how to handball. So no, I've enjoyed. I just absolutely adore the sport. So it's a huge privilege that I get to work on it.
Have you been to a showdown? The Adelaide supporters and the Port Adelaide supporters, as you said about the MCG, two totally different beasts. I mean this in a nice way, but of course, two different varieties of life in the way they live, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. And I have been very fortunate to be to a few showdowns now. I wrote about the showdown last year, the first of the two. And yeah, very different atmosphere to anything else you get when the Crows are playing against someone or Port are playing against someone else. Yeah, the only time the city seems to be divided on anything. Otherwise, the city, like, people of Adelaide get together and love Adelaide equally, even though nobody else does most times. But yeah, that's the only time you see that division play out for the few hours leading into it, during the game, and definitely after the game.
Bharat, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. You can get them on 1300 547 777 or their website www.kissps.com.au, the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria. You're a fascination to listen to. You've got so many different interests in your life, and you're in the very early stages of your broadcasting and media career. You're writing a lot of books as well, so I wish you all the best with that. And I thank you very much for joining me on the program, and I look forward to meeting you face-to-face at a cricket ground somewhere around Australia next summer.
Can't wait, Dan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.